In this video, we are going to build the first dependable drop-down menu. The first one, which will not be using Ajax, we will pre-fill all the options for each select when the page first loads. Now, I've already added the structure for the index blades and the dependable drop-down. So we have a first select, which will have an array of options. This is the first one which will be enabled by default. The first selection will be made from this select. Once the selection has been made, then the second one, which depends on this first one, will display relevant options. And as you can see, the second one, rather than array, uses the object. The properties, the keys, represent the option from the previous select, which means for one, we're going to have small, and for small, then we're going to have green, orange, and yellow. For medium, with value set to true, we will have blue, white, and black. And for the last item, we'll have silver, brown, and pink. And the same will apply to the following one, depending on what option will be selected from the color select, single select, that will dictate which options will be displayed in this last third dropdown. We will add the depends on property, which will contain the value selected from the previous select. So for the second one, we are looking for the size, which is the first select. For the last one, we are going to be passing depends on the value from the color field. So let's now go back to our single view file, and let me just close the file browser on the left. And if we scroll down, I'm going to add the first property, which will be called depends on. And this is when we're actually going to obtain the value of the previous select. So type, by type, you can leave it off. I'm going to only allow number and string. And then it's not going to be required, so required set to false. Then the next thing I'm going to do is a record, rather than having options straight away, I'm going to set to an empty array. And after this, within the mounted, before I actually will emit anything, I will call the new method called fetch. So let's quickly add this method. Fetch. And what this method will do, first of all, we will check if our options is of the object type. If it's of the object type, we know that this is already dependable dropdown. It's not the first one that loads enabled. It's going to be one that actually depends on the previous selection. So we start with the conditional statement if helper dot is object, and we are going to pass this options. Then that means that it's not the first select, it's one of the dependable ones. So this records equals this options, and want to get records based on the previous selection. So this depends on. And after this, we are simply terminating the statement because we're not going to do anything else. If I just scroll up to the import, it didn't import our helper. So let's just quickly import this one. And that should add the statement here. There we go. Helper, 4 levels up, core and helper. Otherwise, we are going to set records to options, this options. Now, this fetch method should be called every time the depends on property changes. This depends on property, once again, is representing the value of the previous select, the one that this one depends on. So every time the value is being changed in this previous select, we have to call this fetch method because different selection will require different options for this particular select. In order to do this, we are going to make use of the watcher. So section watch, and here what we are going to do is create a method which is representing the property that we want to watch. So depends on. Let me just do it this way. If we use the value, the new value that this depends on property will have after the change outside of this component, this selected, we are going to set to an empty value to reset this select. And then if isn't value, if there is no value associated with this depends on, which means they probably selected the placeholder which represents empty value for the given select, then what we want to do is disable this dependable dropdown. So this disable. And we have this method obviously available if I scroll up, because we're using base input, which in return uses disable, and this disable obviously have enable and disable methods. Okay, so if we scroll down, otherwise, if we have value, if the value is anything other than null or empty string, then this enable, we're going to enable this input, and then we'll fetch data, so fetch, to make sure that relevant options are being presented to the end user. And after all this, we are going to emit the value. So emit, and this selected. Okay, so now let's recompile everything and let's try it in the browser. So I've now recompiled my assets. If I refresh the page, you can see we have all these 3 dependable drop-down menus. If I just go to form wrapper just to see what we have, fields, there we go. At the moment, nothing's selected. If I select size, small, you can see the size value is being associated with the property, and then obviously the second drop down becomes enabled. If I select green, the third one becomes enabled, and obviously color is also being added to the fields, and then the last one, apple, and there we go, all the items are selected. Now if I reset any of this, let's say the first one, you'll see that all the other ones are reset, and obviously they are now disabled. So if we go for medium, now we're going to have a different selection. If I go for large, another set of items is being available. So brown, and there we go. So that's one approach when we provide all the values for the select inputs when the page first loads. But most applications will probably use Ajax approach, meaning that when we make a selection from one of the select inputs, the Ajax call is made to the server to obtain values for the next one. And this is exactly what we're going to cover in the next video.